Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Upset Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Latasha Hewitt. And as always, I'm happy to have the crew with me, my fellow Upsetters. What's going on, everyone?
We're here. We're here.
Good to
Hello,
see
hello.
you.
Yes. So, we're continuing the dialogue on things that are happening in our world and uh, particularly in the Black community. Recently, I don't want to see, I'm hesitating to use the word celebrate, but recognize. Usually, when you're thinking about the 100-year significance of something, you would hope it would be something positive. However, we are all familiar, and if we had not been before, many are just learning about the existence of Black Wall Street and the implications for what happened in this town in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so we're going to just dive into a little bit of this today. We hope that you all will dialogue with us in the chat or as you're watching this, your thoughts as well. But Pat, go ahead and lead us out in this discussion. So many layers to it. So, you guys have to bear
It
with
it
us.
is. This is one of those things we could do a couple of parts on. I mean, it's just amazing. Sometimes we hear about things that happen in bigger cities, or if you could say Philly, like we were talking about in the green room, we were talking about what happened with the Chuck. What was it? The move.
Yeah, the move
Family,
family, yes.
the household that
Move
there.
organization.
But I look at it and think to myself, 100 years ago, May 31st, we were dealing with a 40 square blocks of wreckage. We saw that there were deputized people from the sheriff's office, that white people from the sheriff's office, that were able to go out there and destroy almost 1,300 homes, right? Taking down our hospitals and taking down schools and churches, close to 200 businesses that were out there that we haven't seen again. Now, you talk about 100 years has passed through this, and we haven't really seen it come out. Some of us are hearing about it for the first time because of the 100 years that came through. But I want us to have a discussion over this, because there's a lot of things that happened as we went as it was going on. And I want to be able to touch certain things that will help us through it. I know that when we look at the massacre that has happened, and yes, I'm calling it a massacre. GP, I know we had discussions over this. So what I want to do is kind of go back before the massacre. Is that okay? Because if we can go back before the massacre, then we can kind of set up the story to the how and the when. And then, we'll just unleash Marlena and we can close the show from there.
Sounds like a plan.
I'm good today, guys.
So here's the background. So before the massacre, Greenwood had a population of more than 100,000 Black people. So imagine a region of this city of Tulsa, a Black neighborhood, and you had luxury shops, restaurants, 30 grocery stores, a hospital,
Wow.
banks. You had airport with private jets.
Yeah, they said charter
owned.
charter flights.
You had clothing stores. You had 2 movie theaters, a library, pool halls, a bus and a cab service, a nationally recognized school system, and 2 Black newspapers. And so these are all Black owned. And during this time, we know about Jim Crow. So the wealth stayed in the community because they were not allowed to shop anywhere else. And so the money had to stay in Greenwood.
Right.
And so, we celebrate, unity, keeping the dollar in amongst ourselves. But they were in a situation where they had to do that. They had no other choice. And so they thrived economically. And of course, the haters do what they do. But I want people to recognize, we were doing it big. And we had a lot of amazing things going on. And I could imagine, had that massacre not occurred, we would have had many, many Greenwoods all across America, because people would see the power of unity and what we can do with our money together.
I like
Yeah.
what you were saying just now. We basically what's going on is that if the dollar can circulate 6 to 7 times in your community before it goes out, then it would actually build out that community a whole lot better. Growing up in Brooklyn, New York, we have the Hasidic Jews that's out there. Their money is not going out until it circulates a couple of times first before it goes out. And I think that's one of the things that were happening in Oklahoma and different budding places. So then the storyline goes, this real quick, and the storyline goes that there's a shoe shiner. He's 19 years old, I believe, and he gets into an elevator and he might
Dick
have tripped
Rowland.
or and bumped into a 17-year-old a white lady that's operating the help me, the elevator.
Elevator.
She screams out, and all of
Mm.
a sudden, I don't know, Latasha, you know the story from there. You follow it from there.
Well, yeah. I mean, first, as you mentioned, his name's Dick Rowland. He was
Yep.
the shoe shiner, and he was doing so well shining shoes of these rich, wealthy people that he even had like this diamond crusted butt buckle, so they called him Diamond Dick because he was just known for
Wow.
the belt buckle. And every day he would go into this building to use the restroom, and as you mentioned, there's this elevator operator, her name was Sarah Page, would operate the elevator that took him from one floor to the other. I mean, and he did this every day for a while. But on one particular day, of course, which started all of this, well, didn't really, but there she screams. No one knows why she screams. We just know that Dick Rowland starts running, and of course, through a series of events, they assume first that he assaulted her in some way, and then of course it elevated to the point where he raped her. Okay, so then there's this outrage that's happening, of course, because we know what happens when a black man does anything to a white female. There's this heightened sensitivity. Now, of course, leading up to this, white people in this town hated in Tulsa hated Greenwood. Okay,
Right.
we have
Mhm.
to just
Right.
be very clear about that.
Sure.
Even before that incident happened, they had their eyes on these millionaires. I mean, some of these were black millionaires. They were
Yep.
looking at what they
Mhm.
had in their own areas and saying, "Wait a minute, how can these people who are less than have more than
Mm. Have
we
mercy.
do?" And so all of that thought process was the seed so that when this incident happened, things took off from there. I'll stop there and let's.
No. That's good because now we're looking at a powder keg situation, right? And when we look at that powder keg situation, something is about to happen. They take the young man, and of course, they take him to the courthouse. And Marlena, I kind of want to come to where we are now and then go back to 1921. And the reason why I'm saying that is because there's some laws coming out now with voting rights, right? We'll go back. There's some laws that's happening as far as lynching. They said the article that was written even during that same time had kind of like secretive messages in the article that says, hey, we're going to lynch tonight, or we're going to lynch
Mhm,
today. Marlena, why don't you
yeah.
take us to where we are now with some of the things that's happening politically, and we'll take it back.
Got you. And I just wanted to, because as you were talking, my brain was just going, and
Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to say how proud I was of us as a people.
Sure.
Realize that it was, if I counted, I think slavery abolished around 1863. Does
60.
that sound about
That's
right?
right. That's
Yep.
right.
68, 63, 64, something like that, right? We're talking in 1921. That's 57, 58 years later.
Mhm.
I mean, just look at that. Just 50 something years
Mhm.
later, a little less
That's right.
than 60, that there's a community of black people that are so wealthy. I mean, I'm just excited just to know that that happened. And
Mhm.
then I did see the documentary that came out on the History Channel of how so many blacks had marched in World War One, and they got out their uniforms. They marched out to that courthouse together. I mean, they were sharp. They were intact. They looked good. And that's
Mhm.
what upsetted the people of that time, because here the blacks were so prosperous. They were together and they were educated, and listen, they were
And had their own
unified,
police.
just as,
Had their own police.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
they were
Mm-hmm.
unified. Did you get that? Unified.
Yep.
And I think
I got
Unified.
it.
about what happens today. If they could do it less than 60 years after slavery then, why can't we do it now if we
Right.
as a people remain unified, right?
Right.
But
Right.
there are systems that really are to keep us from progressing. And there is the same fear that was
Uh-huh.
then, there is the same fear now. So what
Yeah.
happened in Georgia completely messed up the white Georgians,
Sure.
because how dare black and browns go out and vote, right? And get two Democrats in the Senate. And that has
Well,
never happened. This is, oh, they knew it was covered. They knew.
Right.
But I'm so glad I serve a God, oh my goodness, that knows how to upset people,
say
right?
that.
And so here, so now they're saying that's never going to happen again. So
Hmm.
they have even changed laws that have said you can't even bring people water. You just have to die out there. You can't bring
Come on.
water, you can't bring food, you can't dance, you can't celebrate, you can't
That's
do
right.
any of that. And then they changed the electoral college, because remember, number 45 says just change it, right? Just go ahead and change it, right? And so they couldn't then, but now what Georgia said, this will never happen again. So they made laws so that their electoral college could change anything, which is sad. Everybody can
Hmm.
go out to vote, right? And then they can come back and change the vote to
Hmm.
whomever they want it to be.
Mhm.
Listen,
And so
let me
we
let me.
see here,
1921.
Right.
oh,
I heard you,
they're changing
GP.
it around,
This is
right?
2021. What? This is
2021.
baffling.
Woo!
Listen, I need to back this up a little, because the reason why I know we were talking in the green room about lynching and how they even didn't want to take it off they didn't want to take it
The
out of
books,
the
right.
legislator, all right, or legislator
Right, right,
off the
right.
books. The reason why I brought that up is because if you go back now to 1921, it would it would have come across as a legit lynching. If you can't even put legit lynching in there, right? But you come on, right? So here's where now the powder keg explodes. The powder keg explodes. They are walking through the street with guns. They're walking through the street with. I'm having a feeling as I'm reading and as I'm watching some of these documentaries, great documentaries that's out there, that there had to be some type of inside plan to destroy this place, right? Let me just do something really quick.
Beforehand. Right.
Yeah, right. Beforehand, right? We knew there was a
Mhm.
powder keg coming, but the question was when, and they're using this situation now. Let me do something real quick, Chuck. I want you to bring us to your nationality, things that have happened with, because this is not the first massacre that we've all been through. Take
Right.
us
Right.
to there, and then let's go back to the destruction of Rosewood. So Rosewood, yeah, that too,
Well,
right? That
yeah,
That
too,
was
yeah, that
yeah.
too.
Back in 1923, the
Yeah.
Osage tribe,
Hmm.
the indigenous people of this land, um, just 2 years later, the same thing pretty much happened to them. The Osage in 1923 had businesses.
Hmm. Hmm.
They had a lot of the same businesses that the blacks had in Tulsa. Dressed well, drove, had their own vehicles and whatever. In fact, history says that at that time, um, the tribe was worth in dollars $30 million, which is the equivalent of $400 million today. And that didn't rest well with a lot of folk.
Mhm. Yeah.
And they took that away from them very much in the same way. But they were systematically murdering the Osage tribe.
Wow.
And in fact, history says that this was pre-FBI. The FBI got its teeth cut in terms of investigating on the massacres that took place with the Osage. So actually, the FBI's first major case was what happened to the Osage tribe, very similar to what happened to blacks in Tulsa.
Wow.
So if you step back, you see a trend in history.
Yeah. Yeah.
The ruling class, or the
Yeah.
people that consider themselves the ruling class, when they feel that those under them are becoming equal, they have to break that down.
Right.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's still
Very much.
happening, but it's a lot more sophisticated. It's a lot more data and digital, oriented, but it's still happening today.
Right.
And so are we learning from our history?
Are we learning?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
The
Latasha. I'm
history
sorry. I
is
know you.
repeating. Yeah, go Tosh.
Yeah. No,
Still
I was just
repeating.
thinking, the thing that really, I mean, whites were already upset with the success of what these black business owners were doing, but that the turning point, I think, was that the oil, when they discovered that oil, they're like, oh no, like you guys were
Mm.
doing well, but now you found oil. Like I think that there's just something, this potential, when black people or other groups of people have access to potential wealth, and I think in their minds wealth equates power, and you know
Yes.
it becomes so intimidating that the only thing they see is we have to take this down. I mean, because listen, black in Greenwood, people were minding their own business. It was literally minding their own businesses. It wasn't even about capitalism. It was about them creating an economic system that worked, where people could. They weren't even trying to take businesses down around. They were self-contained and doing what they weren't
Mm-hmm.
bothering anybody.
Yep.
That's the thing that gets me.
And that was at a time when capitalism was a good thing.
That's right.
True,
That's
true.
right. That's right.
It started out with very good intentions, but as time went on
But
and
it wasn't
greed
for us.
increased.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't intended for us, but we started to capitalize, to use another term, on capitalism, but for a good reason and a good purpose.
Right.
Today, it is not that. It is for selfish reasons.
Right.
It's for greed today, and it's being abused. I am an anti-capitalist. Not that I'm against capitalism. I'm against the version of capitalism that it's become today, because it's now become oppressive.
Right.
Yeah.
In other words, somebody has to get hurt. Something has to. There has to be another side of it. So if you're wealthy here, that means there has to be poor people here, and
Right.
not just poor because they're not doing anything, but you have to step on their shoulders. So in order for them, remember now, they had their own police. Come on. They had their own guards per se. Right. In other words, feeling basically safe in their own areas. And the lynch mob comes, and why I think, and I'm going to put it out there, GP, if you want to start off on this, the reason why I'm putting this out there is because it seems like there was a systematic way of destroying their 40 square mile blocks. There was something systematic to me in the way it was done. Go.
Yeah, and notice that the reports testified that they took everything we had that they thought was valuable, and they just smashed everything they couldn't take. And also, this massacre wasn't just 3 hours, 5 hours, 48 hours.
That's right.
Yes.
How many square feet you said this area was?
Square blocks, 30 to
35.
40 square blocks. Yep.
I think it was over 40.
full days to literally kill, shoot, burn, steal. That's crazy.
Yep.
It is. It
Yep.
is. And I mean, they still don't really know what went down with that whole Sarah Page thing and those accusations. But it to me, that was the cat. They were looking for some catalyst, something to give
Right.
them permission to
reason.
be
Excuse.
angry about
Mhm.
something that they felt was justifiable, because they knew just being jealous or threatened by a group of people was not enough of a justification to do what they wanted to do. But even getting to that point where these people are outside of the courthouse and calling for this lynching, and black people are coming together and say, no, we're not going to allow you to do this.
That's right.
Even being in that environment where I was hearing about an incident where there was a white man who came to the black man and said, what are you doing with that gun? What do you plan to do with it? And the guy's like, well, we'll see what happens. Pretty much whatever what you guys
Right.
do will dictate what we do with this. And the guy didn't like that response, so he tries to take the gun out of his hand, which results in this shot. And this was the shot that
started everything.
Set it all
everything.
off.
And it's like, oh, this is all we needed. It was almost like they were poised and ready for something, not knowing what it was, per se, but knowing something was going to be that marker to say, let's go. And
Well,
it's
So
just
I have a question.
And from a mental
And
point of
I,
view, it was tough for people of that time, whites of that time,
yeah.
to realize that black people who in the back of their minds were their slaves
Mm-hmm.
suddenly
Less than human.
become richer than they
Yeah.
are.
same
They
generation.
couldn't handle that,
Come on.
such as the case with the Osage. They thought of the Indians as wild Indians,
Right.
savages.
Right.
And
Mhm.
here they were walking around in French made dresses,
Yeah.
Mm.
had their own schools. And they couldn't handle that. They, meaning the whites of that time, they couldn't handle that. You are wild Indians. You are black slaves. You
Yeah.
cannot be enriched. Sorry.
Mercy.
So, but and
Yeah.
if you think about it, Marlena started off by talking about the time frame between 1863 and where they are right now. There are literally people who are there. Let's even if they were in their 20s or in their 30s that have seen slave broken in that time, who probably still couldn't live with that. Here's the thing: when I saw some pictures, though, I saw some of them that were marching through the street. I'm talking about when the mob got together and wanted them to leave their homes. They were dressed in suits and
their
zoot suits
uniforms,
and
yes,
yeah.
yes, yes.
Well, I'm not even talking about the fighting part of it. That
You're
was
talking
their
about
day, their regular
yeah.
Oh,
day
yes,
They
of
yes,
dressed
yes, yes.
well.
Yes.
of being dressed up. And I'm saying to myself, what day did this happen? Was this like on a Sunday or whatever the case may be? But they were dressed. That's why I like the whole Wall Street. Growing up in New York and going on Wall Street, you would walk on Wall Street just to see money pass you. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, when you went on Wall Street, it was financial, and just to think that this was called Little Africa. They called it
Yeah.
Little Africa.
Mhm.
Booker T. Washington called it. He's the one that coined the phrase Black Wall Street. Why? Because money was there. Everything was there. I think what scares me on this is to think that planes, come on, that they had literally crop dusters flying in the air, dropping torches on homes, right?
Well, in their minds, it's war. In their minds, it was war.
Right.
Wow.
Civil War to
But
protect
Wow.
this
also
person's
think,
name.
Mhm.
yeah, but also think, guys, of the arrogance, right? That you have one race of people who expect to excel and that you are not allowed to, right? And so how dare you be prosperous, right? And remember, they were just across the tracks, right? They were just across the tracks.
That's right.
Because
That's right.
when it came to them defending themselves, the only way they were able to win is because they started dropping things from the air, because the brothers were shooting, women
They
had
were
come
shooting
out
back.
to
That's
shoot. They
right.
were
That's right.
yes, they were around their periphery. They were protecting what was there. So they had to come, the white people at that time had to come, against them using governmental forces, because there was no way. They had to be such collegiality for them to be able to come from the sky, right? And
Yeah.
they didn't
Right.
care about who they were. They were killing men, women, children. They did not care. And
Mhm.
so we see that same arrogance today.
Sure
Help
we
me
do.
in this place.
Well,
We
Absolutely.
Sure
see it the
we do.
same. We see it the same because it's still that lust for power and to keep people oppressed, depressed, suppressed. How dare, we be able to, progress, because
Right.
because even with our education, all of us on the line are educated, right? But even with our education, we don't get the same as the white male. We don't get the
well.
same as the white female, so
Mhm.
there is always something to keep us
It's
suppressed, right?
systemic.
And then
Mhm.
yes, yes. And then, ooh,
Systemic.
sir, when you say that, right? And then when there is a white gentleman who gets on national TV to say there's no systemic racism, how can you say it when you don't live
Oh
in our
no.
shoes? You don't walk in our skin. You don't live in our
Mhm.
skin. You have no relationship as to what happens with the black community, and then
Sure.
you
Right.
say there no systemic racism. So then the reparations, that if we were sorrowful for what happened 100 years ago, we supposedly have grown, right? Supposedly,
Mhm.
if we were really sorrowful as to what happened. What's going on with reparations, right? Why can't we say, hey, we made a mistake. We're sorry. This should have never happened. Let's give back to the community so that it can rebuild itself, right? So that kind of community can reestablish, right? But we see it's the same arrogance. It's the same, I'm here, you're here. You will forever remain beneath me, right? You will forever, and we will make sure there are laws that we do not have the same rights.
Listen, let me flip
Right.
this.
It's
Go ahead.
it's even as recent as redlining. I mean, we know redlining is,
Yep.
and some of it's still going on.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's right.
It has gotten very, very sophisticated, very complex. It's not as overt as back in those days. It's very, very sophisticated, and we need to have our eyes wide open as to the way in which this is happening to us on a regular basis.
Mhm.
It's sugar coated.
I-
It's covered with all these smiley faces. Oh, you're like me. You're just like me. You know, I have friends that are your color. You know,
Well, how about
the
we don't
same
need to-
thing is going on.
Hate
How
that.
about we don't need to teach critical race theory and teach these systemic histories
There we go. There we
in
go.
our schools? How
There we
about
go.
we act
Mhm.
like it doesn't exist?
Well,
Let's
here's the
act like
thing. Here's the
Go
thing,
ahead.
GP, that gets me at this. What gives? I think if we didn't have this Black Lives Matter situation, or better yet, the Floyd situation, all these things that's happening now, I think that this Tulsa massacre that happened would not have been as. I'm not saying that it wouldn't have been out there, but it would not have been as powerful as it is right now. The reason why I'm saying that is because you can always discuss and have a conversation about what has happened in the past, because the whites were teaching this, but they taught it as a race riot. Do you understand what I'm saying? They taught it, and
Yeah.
and I think that's where we get this from. When we talk about slavery, we don't talk about it from an economic standpoint. We don't talk about those things because that's the way they want us to believe it. But now we have enough writers, we have enough film directors, we have enough people who are trying to change the historical pattern to let them know that it's a historical pattern, that you have taken our wealth, you have
Right.
taken our history, right? What does it say? And you're doing it not only from blacks, but you're also doing it from blacks, brown communities, right?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
The
with that,
country was built. This country was built on black and brown people,
definitely,
Facts.
and
on the
poor,
backs of, yeah,
and the poor,
absolutely,
and the poor.
absolutely. And man's inhumanity to man
Mhm.
really does not have a color preference, because it is infused with evil.
Mm.
Evil is the common denominator of this stuff.
Oh, have mercy.
The numerator is white, black, Hispanic. You can go down the list. Let's go over to the continent of Africa. There are black tribes that have
Wiped out
massacred other.
That's
Yes.
right.
Yep.
So
That's right.
when you look at it from a global perspective, now we're looking at it from a base evil perspective.
Sure.
Yeah.
Spiritually, evil is the common denominator of all of this.
Mhm. Chuck,
And if we don't step back and look at it from that perspective, we maybe unintentionally will go down this blame game lane.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the white people. And then you go over to Israel. Oh, it's the Palestinians.
right.
Oh, it's you know what? At the end of the day, it is evil.
Mhm.
That's true.
That's right.
It
That's
is
right.
true.
I'm glad
we're
you said
all
that, Chuck,
capable of it.
because I'm glad you said that, Chuck, because I'd love to blame a couple of people for for where they are. But here's what, and I'm not taking away what you say, because we wrestle not against flesh and blood, right? All right, and principalities of darkness. But what I do want our young people to know, that that you got to stay alert. I want our young people to know that you have to understand the dynamics of what has occurred in the past. If you don't understand that, then we're gonna continue to repeat history as we go along. I do like what you were saying, because Chuck, in one of our other podcasts that we came out with, we were talking about police brutality, and in Africa there's black police, and they're you know what I'm saying. So you're right.
Yes.
It's evil and it's global, and it all comes down to how we treat our brethren, how we treat each other. I think it comes down to that. But I don't want our young people, especially the next generation following us, to look at this as just a basic race riot, but that
Right.
No,
it is historical that there are massacres that occur all the time.
right,
If we
right.
go around this circle now,
And
we can
as we
name
speak,
massacres that have
they're
occurred.
happening.
That's right.
As we speak, they're
That's
happening. And
right.
it's important for our young people to dig deep.
Yep.
Don't just Google.
Mm.
You can't always find the truth in Google. When I was growing up in grade school, I was afraid of Black Panthers. I was taught to think they were radical, that they're going to start, race riots, and they're going to kill white people. And if you study the history of the Black Panthers, you'll find that they were a community-based group of
That's
people.
right.
The military,
Yep.
the militant part of who they were was the exception. They were helping their communities, feeding their communities, teaching their communities,
Yeah.
because they knew they had to deprogram his story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So instead of learning his story, learn your story
Mm.
based on the truth of your real research.
Yeah.
I was working on a project with the studying the Lenape Indian, because here at Pine Forge, this was their ground. The Lenni Lenape Indians settled here where I'm sitting.
Mm.
And so we were doing
Wow.
a historic video for Pine Forge Academy. So I had the opportunity to interview a descendant of the Lenape Indians. And one of the things that kind of links in with what we're saying, he had a couple of daughters. He was a historian, and he was also used as a consultant on a lot of major motion pictures in Hollywood for stories that dealt with the indigenous people. He said every time his daughters came home from the public high school, he had to deprogram them
Wow.
based on the books that they had and the history books. And he had to go through and he had to say, honey, this is not true. Let me tell you the real story of our people's struggle.
That's right.
And that has to be the case in any community. You need to tell your story.
Right. Right. It's funny. I was just about to say that to Latasha. I know that GP's daughter is too young for it. And I think about those of us who are, we're in here. I think Tally's daughter, I can't remember how old Tally's daughter is, but when I think about a young kid coming home 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and talking about what has happened in not just the 50s and the 60s, but what has happened last week, what has happened with the 9 that have died in South Carolina, I believe it is, in a Wednesday night prayer meeting. Even leaving from African American and dealing with what's going on with the Palestinians, and I'm not talking about in Europe or over there. I'm talking about at home here, where they're walking into mosques and killing them. My thing is, what do you now tell? This is going to Latasha. What do you tell your daughters? What do you tell them as far as where were we and where do we go from here?
That's a really tough thing to think about. When I was growing up, it was almost like you were taught, do well, succeed, because when you do well, you're more respected, these things. But then when you go back and you hear this story now, wait, these were respected, educated people who were doing well, and they still did it. It makes them say, well, that doesn't mean that if I do well, if I go to college and I get a good degree and I'm doing well for myself, that I'll still be respected in my own country. That it's almost like that's unsettling, because we thought education and success was the key for acceptance in our own country. And now we're learning that even that didn't make a difference. And so, so you're wanting them to aspire to all those things, but yet you have to educate them on the reality in which we live. Like, you can still do all of that, Amar. You can still do all of that, Caden, and they still may not like you. You still may not be accepted. There still may be people who will make sure that you are pressed down and never succeed. Like, you have to give them this dual education that's so heartbreaking, because it's almost like until evil, because as you said, it's evil, until we leave this evil, sin-filled world, this will always be our reality in some regard. And you just really have to fortify your children. One, recognize what's out there, still motivate them to do their best and stand for for rights and for causes that impact them and those around them. But this education, and like you guys were just talking about, having to reprogram some of the things that they get out there.
Sure. Sure.
But then, it's tough. I mean,
Mhm.
it's hard.
Mhm.
It's like,
You know,
And
when I
parents
And may
need
I
to be
share
aware.
this?
It's true, Chuck.
Parents need to be aware. You
Marlena?
study to
May,
teach your children.
that's right.
Marlena,
And I
go.
want to take that that teaching to another level, guys, especially us as a people, as pastors, as leaders, communication leaders. When we look at the Tulsa story and Rosewood and all those others, those people unified together. And I think it's very important for us to teach at least those around us, as we all have a space to talk in, to teach our people that we must unify, and that it is important to grow, right, to grow ourselves academically and financially, through Jesus Christ, but to really teach us as a people. Because when we look at the massacres without, right, we must be careful of the massacres within, because I was thinking of how, there's so many ways to minimize different people, right? Different races of people by, allowing them to self-destruct. So when we look at, guns in the community and why they don't want to keep guns away, and there are people who are grabbing guns, young people are attracted to them and they use them, right? So when we're talking about massacres, I was thinking about the graduations just this past weekend when people came in shooting. We are massacring ourselves, and so we must realize that we have to unify as a people and make sure that we take care of one another, whomever we are, so that we don't self-destruct internally while there's so many external destructions that are out there, and so I think that we must teach our people, where there's evil, there's also love, and that if we love one another and respect one another, and if there are disagreements, let's, work those things out so that we don't massacre within. Anyway, I was just thinking about that because we're
Sure.
teaching our children to beware of others. We got to beware of what's internal. And why
Ourselves.
not we have a microphone, right? Let's teach our brothers, our young kids, because now they're saying a lot of it is started by our young people. They're introduced to guns and all of these things. And when you have it, you're going to use it, right? And so let's not massacre one another. Let's love and be unified as they were in 1921. Let's come together. I just want to say that.
Thanks, Pastor. I like how we began GP when we were talking about the success of not just Tulsa, but their success other places. It just didn't boom as big as where we had it, and I like that. I want to go where Chuck was. I just wanted him to get to discussing that evil part just one more time, Chuck. Reason why is because I don't want anybody to walk away from here with us running the blame game. All right, and that's one thing I don't. And why I want to do that is because I just feel this justice thing, this biblical justice thing coming. So, Chuck, if you could feed us, we were talking about that evil piece, and then we'll jump back over.
It really is the root cause. I mean, just like there is, just like sociologists have said, there is a madness to crowds. It's a gang mentality. Many times crowds get together because crowds get together.
Sure.
And they don't even have an independent thought, but they are driven by the pathology of crowds, which is seated in evil.
Right. Wow.
It is evil that is the fuel of it. So you don't become a prejudiced white guy. You are an evil man.
Right.
That's right.
And I like where you were.
Evil woman.
So because
the adversary wants us to say, the whites say, blacks are bad, whites are good. And then we say blacks are good and whites are bad. and the indigenous people, that, you know, whatever. And the adversary sits back and he's just laughing his guts
Right,
out.
right,
You
right,
guys are cutting
Body
each
humper.
other's throat
Yes.
because of a color.
right.
How stupid can you be?
That
And
means
then you get a
we missed it. We missed the whole. We missed what. Listen, it goes back to
playing
you. Yep, you say crowd mentality. You're going back to, is it Jesus or is it Barabbas, or is it Barabbas or is it Jesus? It was Barabbas. Was Barabbas' real name Jesus? You ever heard that story? His real name was
Right.
Jesus. So if they called him
Right.
out, then we also understand by spirit of prophecy that demons help call out names.
Right.
So you could imagine what was going on in this white mob, and that's what I'm calling it, in this
Absolutely.
white mob, that even demons are presented there to make it
Oh,
even get worse on the spot,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. If we are singled out, sometimes we don't know why we do what we do. There was a story I read about a black man who went to a Ku Klux Klan meeting, walked up to the imperial wizard. Now, these folk were looking at this man is asking for an execution right now. And he simply said to him, I am a black man. You don't know me. Why do you hate me so? And you know what the answer was? Long pause. I don't know.
Of course.
Wow.
Wow.
Of course. Of course.
That clearly said that there are people who say they're evil and say they hate are under the influence of evil.
You better believe it. Marlena, take us on the other side. I want you to give us a biblical background. Talk to us about justice. We'll land this plane.
I just want to say, as we were talking in the green room before we came on, and we want all of our onlookers and supporters to understand that we are talking to truth, but you know, in the sight of God and in our sight, of course, we are not blaming any race of people, because evil, as Brother Charles has said, is within every group, and so every nation of people. And as he was speaking there, it just reminded me, if we could understand, if the enemy can keep us ununified, right? If he can keep this disunity, man against man, right? Then he has this race, he has this world, right, in the grasp of his hands, which is why there's so much evil externally and internally, you know. And so I just wanted to say, because I often think about this, that in all of this, there is still a God who is looking at us. And I know some people get controversial, say, well, you know, if there's God, why is he allowing all of these things to happen? You know, that's another story that we can address. But it makes me think, because even with all of that, and I'm sorry, stuff is always going through my head, right? God will still say, love them, right? Love them. That's another story we have to teach you about, right? Because even though we're discussing this, God still says, love your enemy, you know, and he gave those messages to Martin Luther King, gave it to Jesus. Well, Jesus Christ had it himself, you know, and so we know that love is the key. But I wanted to share with those, because this statement was said to me just this week. Why does it look like, you know, so many white people get away with the evils that they do, you know, and you may have been confronted with that or any other type of evil from any race or any color. And as I was looking at the scriptures, it reminded me of something that I read here. And I just want us to know that there is a judge who sits high and who will judge the people. And so there is a time and a season. Oh, I don't mean
stop rocking,
preach,
GP. Stop rocking. Stop rocking.
But there is someone who looks, but and I want to tell us that the reason God delays is because his salvation is not just for those who we think are righteous, but his salvation is even for the unrighteous, it's even for the evil. And so God gives us time because he's still calling us. But I want to share the scripture that I found, being that I am talking to, you know, the saints, you know, and Psalms 37 verses 27 through 29. Listen to what God says. He says to us, turn away from evil, what Chuck was saying, and do good, right?
Right,
So shall you dwell forever. For the Lord loves justice, right?
Wow.
Justice,
Wow.
right doing, right living, right? And he says he will not forsake his saints. So for those who say, where's God? Why has God forgotten me? I went to prison for something I didn't do. Where was God, when I needed him? It's a, I will not forsake you, right? Then he says they are preserved forever. So even though you're going through, God preserves us forever because there is a time where he will call justice. And he says,
Right.
but the children of the wicked shall be cut off. The children of the wicked shall be cut off. There is a
Amen.
day of reckoning that is coming. You may not see it today, but it is coming. And it
There you
says,
go.
the righteous shall inherit the land and dwell upon it forever. There is a
Okay.
land that is coming where we're going to dwell on it forever, and justice will reign. So I just want to
Oh,
encourage,
yes.
because I needed something to encourage me, because as a people we see everything that is around, and I know it disturbs you, I know that it bothers you, and I want us to know as a people that we see too. We're not just people who, as a church, I had to get that out, because sometimes the church is silent when we should stand up, because Jesus always stood up. He
Mm-hmm.
always stood
He
for
did.
the right, and he stood against those who were wrong. And so as ministers of the gospel, whether we preach it or we air it and make sure that you receive it, those are all of us on the line. We want to make sure that you understand that we serve a just God. And though we
Amen.
might see evil now, and it doesn't appear that we're getting our justice, and as Chuck says, it's not accountability, it's all going to come together. Someday
Yes.
there is
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
to be a day
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
reckoning. So
Yes.
I just wanted to share
Amen.
that. Be encouraged,
Yeah.
our people. Be encouraged.
But my one-liner end,
Uh-huh.
is check your heart
Yeah.
and check to see if you are being run by evil.
Wow.
I'm out.
Have
No,
mercy.
that's
That's good
Yes.
stuff.
that's so
Good
Very
stuff.
true, though.
good.
Good
Very
stuff.
good.
And
Very
just to
good.
piggyback right on what Chuck was saying, I called you Chuck. Huh? What Charles was saying. I was thinking about that. We're pointing out. It's so easy for us to point out the evil that we see in other groups and other people, and sometimes the devil can even use us pointing out evil to distract us from examining the evil that exists within
That's
us. So
right.
I
Right.
think that
Right.
That's
is
right.
something that, as we get enraged by injustice that we see, that while we raising this fist against that we, open it up and have a mirror there on the other hand, where we can say, Lord, is there anything in my heart? Is there anything that I'm doing to offend my brother? And that's something that we, that checks and balances that we have to do as Christians. So I appreciate that being brought up in this dialogue. Thank you guys for that.
Mhm. Well, I'm grateful. I think we've come down to the end of this, but I'm sure, Latasha, you could tell us how everybody could argue with us on this, or if we upset somebody, how they can
Argue.
get how they can get
I'm
Yeah,
back to
sure we
us.
upset some people.
yeah. I mean, and we have to be honest. This is just an upsetting topic
Sure it
in
is.
general. And the more you read about it, I hate to say it, the more upset you can get, because when I was reading about Greenwood, I wanted to live there. Like, I'm thinking, like, man, this was my kind of place, So you start to internalize it and feel like that was you, and those were you, and it was. These were our people. This happened to, but we have to have that perspective that we talked about. Recognizing the evil, but recognizing it as evil, not targeting specific groups. But anyway, if you have some comments. If you have comments that you want to share with us, that's what we want to hear. We've talked. We've said we want to say. There's the upset at aacsd.com. If you don't want to put it in the chat as you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to email us, and we can anonymously bring some of your comments. And our next podcast, we're going to start bringing some of your comments from our previous episodes to hear what you're saying about some of these topics. And guys, we have
great.
Juneteenth. We have Juneteenth coming up.
Sure.
Very soon, and I think that's something that we probably should talk about. What's the significance of that? Is that something we should be celebrating? I mean, it's trending, but why is it trending? So we have a lot of things coming up down the queue.
Ooh, Father's Day too.
Yep, Father's Day is around the corner. We have a new father in our midst.
here.
We have long-term fathers who have
Yep.
all this wisdom. So we'll be tackling
those of us who want to stop paying into it. But go ahead.
fathers that are ready to let go of that leash. Yeah, we understand. So we have all of these great topics coming up in future episodes of the podcast. We hope that you're sharing this with friends, where you're downloading and engaging us on all of those podcast platforms. We really appreciate your support so far. And thanks for getting upset with us. But at the end, thanks for hopefully finding some of the silver lining in all of these topics that we discussed. All right, guys, it's been another great discussion. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.